What do we need to consider in writing research following the quantitative method? Let's find out in today's discussion. For now, let's all bow our heads and feel the presence of the Lord. To my fellow Catholics, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, Amen. Lord God, we came before your holy presence to glorify your holy name. This opportunity to learn and share thoughts. As we listen to the lecture, allow us to empty our cups and embrace new ideas. Fill our minds with eagerness to further our knowledge and become your humble servants. Moreover, we appeal to your Midas touch to help those who are struggling to survive the wrath of this pandemic, that they may rise from the challenge of getting their lives back. Bless each and every one of us, so with our families, to be away from any harm and make us a blessing to others. Finally, guide our resource speaker as he shares with us his experience and wisdom. All these things we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Seek and you shall find. These resounding words reverberate to those who wanted to fine tune their craft most often. Like the inquisitive innocent mind of a child, a researcher is always on the lookout of what is new and what further develops. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Powerhouse Scholastic Center. I am Mr. Mark Castro, and I'll be your host. Morning po. First of all, we would like to thank you for signing up for today's event. For everyone's knowledge, Powerhouse Scholastic Center is an online platform dedicated to tutorials, review sessions, certificate courses, and professional advancement trainings. It employs tutors, instructors, and review specialists who are adept in their fields of specialization. PSC, although holds courses online, still maintains an office in the heart of Quezon City, Philippines. With its determined founding partners, Powerhouse is committed to deliver quality instruction across the globe in the digital world. We are we are duly recognized by the government. As you can see, the copy of our certificate of registration and the Securities and Exchange Commission, simply because Powerhouse Scholastic Center is under the CBR Academic Solutions Company. So if you want to search us in Securities and Exchange Commission for verification purposes, you can see the name of our company there. Thank you. Let me continue. We have a big number today we have a big number today. Participants' background are diverse. We have teachers, training officers, government employees, and graduate school students. Also, attendees today came from Metro Manila, Luzon, Visayas, and all the way from Mindanao. And I was told by our marketing officer that today we have participants straight from Cambodia. So welcome. I was also told that they are currently studying in the National University of Cambodia. So we have 5 participants who are actually staying overseas. Welcome to Powerhouse Scholastic Center. Hope we're all safe. This time, allow me to introduce the novice yet goal-oriented founding partners of the CBR Academic Solutions Company. First off is the finance officer, Mr. Edward Rich Ibayangos. Unfortunately, he cannot join us today. The, Another member of the board is our education technology specialist, Engineer Danny J. Rampun. Let's all pray for him because he's currently battling an illness. And completing the board is yours truly, Mr. Mark Castro, the program head. Part of PS's vision is to hold professional advancement training sessions that serve as venue for interaction among leaders, students, and practitioners of different fields. Today, we'll give you a slice of that via research writing series, Quantitative Research Writing. I would like also to welcome back our participants in the previous sessions of Powerhouse. Ma'am April is here, Ma'am Yasmin, and Ma'am Elsie. They've been attending our sessions in the previous weeks, which proves that Powerhouse Scholastic Center is not a scam, guys. We are legit. So, again, thank you for signing up today. We are definitely sure that at the end of the session, you will learn a lot, or we will learn a lot from our resource speaker, whom I am about to introduce. Again, we would appreciate if you would open your cam and with your mic off. Thank you. Also, before Dr. Fabella's lecture, please reserve your questions because at the end, I will be asking Dr. Fabella to answer all those. And if you're currently undergoing already or if you're currently writing already your thesis or dissertation, Dr. Fabella would also be generous to answer your questions later for free, should you need advice. Without further ado, allow me to introduce our resource speaker. Our resource speaker is a well-decorated, international acclaimed researcher whose works have been published here and abroad. He is currently the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences and the Research Director of Mary the Queen College, Commonwealth Avenue, Diliman, Quezon City, Philippines. His excellent and relevant works made him chosen by the Asia Pacific Excellence Awards as the most outstanding Filipino writer in 2017. Ladies and gentlemen, my honor to present to you our resource speaker for today, Dr. Frederick Edward T. Fabella.
Yeah, thank you, Sir
Good
Mark,
morning, sir.
and good morning to everyone. So this is an
Morning, sir.
international, yeah, good morning. So this is an international audience. So I will be forced to speak in pure English. This is going to be a challenge. Although I also have international students in the graduate school based in Thailand and Lao. They pronounce it Lao, not Laos. Okay, so let me begin by opening my. Before I forget, no, I want to say hello to everyone so that it becomes personalized. So let me say good morning to Mom Emily, Mr.
Good
Hancock.
morning, sir.
Hancock, I hope I pronounced your name right.
Yeah,
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 good
yeah.
morning. Sir Rommel, Mom Donna, Mom Elsie, it's nice to see you
Hello, sir.
again.
Good morning.
Good morning po. And Ma'am Mel, Mr. Suman Das.
Yeah. Good
Okay.
morning. Good morning,
Good
sir.
morning. Yeah. Mr. Mar Van Hap. Okay. Good morning. Sir Ram Makaraig. So just letters. I don't know what your name is, no? IGC, is that IGC or LGC? Okay. And Sir Joshua, Ma'am Faye, Sir JP, Sir Genesis, Sir Irvin, and Sir Richmond. So I'm not sure is everybody in the screen. I only call the ones in the screen. Yeah, okay. So good, good. So it's nice to meet everyone. Thank you for joining. No? Thank you for joining our session this morning, no? Sunday morning. I hope you will all find it a very productive and meaningful morning because research is actually my passion. Okay, so if with everyone's permission, I will be sharing my PowerPoint slides now. Okay, let me just make this full view. And okay, so wait just a moment. All right. So, guys, please let me know if well, because of our dependence on technology, no, the slides might not be moving forward or something like that. So, if you see that I'm talking about something that's no longer on the slide, please let me know so I can fix whatever it is that needs to be fixed. All right. Okay, so let me know if the slide is already in your screen. Now, maybe you can let me know.
Okay na
Can
po,
you
sir.
Yes,
see it
sir. Okay
already?
na po.
Okay, so thank you very much for the feedback. So let's begin. So today we will be focusing on quantitative research, but this is something like a crash course because usually we study these things for an entire semester. So I tried to make it as simple and as brief as possible. No? Okay, so let's begin. Okay, so the subtopics that we will be covering this morning are the following. So, what are the characteristics? What makes quantitative research different from qualitative? Okay, as well as an overview of the different types of quantitative research. So there are different types. Okay, we'll try to go into the details as much as we can during the limited time that we have. We will also be discussing what it means to operationalize a variable, as well as how to measure these variables. And we'll touch on the topic of statistics a little bit now, because statistics is a very big field in itself. We cannot really discuss all of it. No, we'll just see what its role is in quantitative research. All right. So let us begin with the first part. So, what is quantitative research? So, we will have an overview of the characteristics. Okay. So, by the word itself, whenever I try to teach my students a technical word or a new word, no, I always tell them go back to the root word. What is the root word of quantitative? It has something to do with quantity, and when it has something to do with quantity, it has something to do with numbers. It must be measurable. It must be mathematical. So quantitative is quantifiable. It's about quantifiable data. Okay, so let's try to see. The first characteristic of quantitative research is that it uses structured tools. Okay, so there is a structure, there is a sequence, there is a format that you need to follow, and you cannot deviate from that format. Okay, so all right, so we will understand that better with the other characteristics. Okay, it also has something to do with getting or identifying a target population and getting a sample from that population. Due to our limitations, we cannot really study the entire population. That's why we just need to get a sample. And then later we will discuss how to get a sample. So that's part of our lecture for this morning. Okay. Aside from that, because of the first characteristic, that we are using structured tools, we also employ close-ended questions, not open-ended. When you say open-ended, you can talk about anything. No, any answer is acceptable. But in quantitative research, it is closed-ended. You have a limited number of options for you to be able to answer a particular question. Okay. All right. Aside from that, we make use of prior studies. Now, we have to be guided by the current and the most recent studies. That's why in some schools, when you are doing your thesis, you have to take into consideration the dates, the years when the researches or the studies that you are including in your related studies were made. No, because if it's too old, it's no longer recent, and there might be new discoveries already. Okay, so we have to stay updated. And these studies, they guide us. All right. Okay, because we are dealing with quantitative data, we usually employ um, representations of these quantities, which makes the results more understandable. We use graphs, charts, and all these things, right? It's easier to understand instead of just writing a bunch of numbers on the page. Okay, all right. And we can also generalize, but in order for us to be able to do this, there are some strict requirements. We will find that out later. What are the strict requirements for us to be able to generalize? I remember, just to share with you, no, I was a panelist in one of the uh, final defense of this masteral thesis. No, there was this professor who was trying to generalize, but his study was qualitative. So because I was the panelist, I told him you cannot generalize, no? Because you can only conclude based on your respondents. So if you have only 8 respondents, you can only conclude for those 8, not for all of the whole world. Okay, so there is that limitation in qualitative, which is not the case in quantitative, provided you follow the rules. All right. So those are the characteristics. No? So they are just there to guide us. You don't have to memorize them or remember them. We just need to appreciate them. That's what makes quantitative different from qualitative. Okay, so let us proceed. So quantitative research begins when you identify two things where one might affect the other. So we will go back to the very basics. Okay, the very basics. Okay, what's the very basic? How does research begin? It starts with you being curious about something, whether one thing affects the other, right? Okay, so we can refer to these two things that affect one another as variables. Okay, so variables. Like, for example, the growth of a plant, that's one variable. And you have the amount of water, that's another variable. Okay, does the amount of water that you use to for the plant affect its growth? Okay, that's a very simple question, but that actually encapsulates the concept of research already. Okay, we can refer to water as the variable one, and the growth of the plant is variable two. And the direction is from water to plant. No, it won't make sense if it's from plant to water. Does the growth of the plant affect the amount of water? It makes no sense at all, right? So it has to make some sense. The directionality of the influence has to make sense. Okay. All right. Now, usually we need at least two variables in order to conduct a quantitative research. At least two. Okay. Otherwise, if it's just one variable, it's not really much of a research. Like, for example, you want to find out um, what is more popular. Oh, for example, here in the Philippines, you have two very popular types of fast food, Jollibee and McDonald's. What is more popular, Jollibee or McDonald's? No? If you just try to answer that question, that's not even research. That's just a survey. Why? Because there's no factor. There are no factors involved. That's why when I encounter proposals like that, okay, so you just want to make a survey. That's not research because you're not identifying anything that would affect the variable. And what's your variable? Popularity. That's it. No? But if we divide, for example, the people, males and females, we come up with a variable. We now have two variables. Okay. So let's try to demonstrate that. No? So we have variable one and variable two. Okay. You ask the question, does one variable affect the other? That's our question usually, right? And that's the directionality of the influence of variable one to variable two. Okay, all right. Does one variable affect the other? Okay, so does changing variable one affect variable two? That's actually the question that you want answered. No? such that if you increase variable 1, what happens to variable 2? That's actually what you want to find out. What happens when you change variable 1? What happens to variable 2? Because if there is no change, there is no relationship, there is no influence, there is no effect. So that's what we're trying to find out. Okay? Okay? Or if you decrease variable 1, what happens to variable 2? So that's basically what we're trying to do in quantitative research. Finding out whether what one variable affects the other. Okay? In quantitative research, your variables must be quantifiable or measurable. Okay? Otherwise, if you cannot measure it, you cannot control it. If you cannot measure it, you cannot control it. Okay, so that's one very basic principle. No? Amount of water, is that quantifiable? Yes, because it can be measured. No? Either the amount or the frequency of watering. No? Growth rate, is that measurable? Yes, it can be quantified. No? Inches, centimeters, per day, per week, per month, right? So they're both quantifiable. Okay. This is why it is necessary that you have instruments that can measure your variables. Okay, so later we will go into measurement. So right now we're just going into the basics. Okay, so in the physical sciences, I'm sure we've all studied physics, chemistry, and all these things. No, we have variables that involve temperature, density. These are just examples. No? There are so many. No? Just to give you an idea. Okay, friction, acceleration, velocity, resistance, mass, all these things are variables. And that's how you conduct experiments in physics and chemistry. You measure these variables and how one variable affects the other, right? That's what you do in the physical sciences. But in the social sciences, let's also include education there. The variables are different. The variables are very different. We don't talk about objects, no? We don't talk about matter. We don't talk about chemicals. We talk about what? Things that affect or represent human behavior. Things that represent human behavior, such as what? We deal with constructs like what? Profile. What is the profile of the people? Age, gender, etc. Motivation is a construct, right? Attitude is a construct also. Emotional quotient or emotional intelligence is also a construct. Personality, with many different factors, is also a construct. Self-esteem is also a construct. Perception is also a construct. These are the variables that we uh, focus on when we talk about non-physical sciences, no? The social sciences. So sciences that involve people. That's why they're called social. No? And we can include education there, no? Since most of us, if not all of us, are involved in the field of education. All right. Okay. So there you have it. You just want to introduce the concept of variables because this is the heart. This is the heart of what you're trying to study in quantitative research. You have to identify what variables you want to study and the directionality of the influence of one on the other. Okay? All right. So that's about variables. Okay. Now that we have already talked about what variables could be, we now need to understand operationalizing the variable. What do you mean by operationalizing? No, we have to define it very clearly because if you don't define it very clearly, you won't be guided by your research. You won't know actually what to study if you don't operationalize it. And when you do your research, or when you write it rather, when your readers read, or when another researcher reads your research, if you do not define your variables well, they won't understand what you are talking about. Okay, so the point of operational definitions is to guide you and to make your research understandable to others. Okay. So, an operational definition is clear, concise, and detailed. No? Okay. All right. If you do not define your data, you will have inconsistent and an erroneous result. Okay. Okay. And sometimes you're the only one who understands what you're doing. Other people do not. That's why you need to make sure that your definitions are very clear and understandable. Okay. All right. People have different ideas of what you're talking about. Later, we will demonstrate this. You might understand what you are talking about, what you're researching, but others may not. That's the reason why you need an agreed upon definition that is very clear without any confusion, without uh, people being having the wrong idea of what you are trying to study. Okay, that's also very important when you're proposing your topic. Okay, when you want to do a research and you want to propose a topic to a panel before they approve your topic, you have to make sure that the panel understands what you want to study. Okay, all right. So you need a detailed operational definition that eliminates ambiguity. Okay, so I guess that's already very clear. All right, now I'll give you an example here. Okay, all right. Now if you look at these two pictures, what does this picture say, or and what does that other picture say? What are these pictures representing? One is representing temperature, right? And you see the sun there behind the thermometer. Another one is the sketch that people draw. Usually you see these in the what movies and TV shows. They sketch where the person was found dead, crime scene, right? So we're talking about crime here. So imagine if these are your two variables: heat of the day, huh? Heat of the day or hot weather, and violent crime. Of course, violent crime. It resulted in death, so of course it's violent, right? Because there are non-violent crimes. So we're talking about violent crimes. Okay. So a researcher wants to measure whether there is a relationship between hot weather and violent crime. What do you think? If you were to do a research like this, would you have this idea? Would you believe that it's the heat? It's the heat of the day that causes people, not us, people to commit crimes. I wonder if there is a connection. How do you prove that? How do you study it? Okay, so, all right. Perhaps their guiding hypothesis is as temperature increases, so will violent crime. If there's a day, the day is pretty hot, maybe crimes will be more frequent that day. Okay, that's the hypothesis. Okay, as you increase the heat, you also increase the number of crimes. Okay, so that's the idea. That's just the that's just the concept. You have the concept, so you have a conceptual framework now. But that's not enough. That's not enough. Okay. Here we have two variables, weather and violent crime. We need to operationalize these two variables first so that we can effectively do the quantitative research and come up with a clear conclusion, right? Okay, so how will we operationalize hot weather, the heat? Okay, so this is your variable one. It's your weather. No? And how will you define weather? How would you define weather? If I were to ask you, okay, so how would you define weather? Okay, if you just want to use temperature, no problem. No? That's how, that's maybe one way of defining weather. The heat, no? Outside temperature, outside temperature. And if you look at the news, there is always a record of the temperature for that day in a particular place, right? So if you're from the Philippines, you might have noticed that there were some days, weeks ago, that were very cold, very cold. You see now the how climate change is affecting our weather, right? Okay, before I get distracted by climate change. Okay, so we now have an idea of how to operationalize weather. We just consider temperature, right? Outside temperature in what? In degrees Celsius. Okay, but we need to get a little bit more specific, because there's no stable temperature throughout the day. So maybe you can just get what? The high recorded temperature for the day. So again, we're the ones who are creating the operational definition. It depends on you, the researcher, on what it is you want to use as your operational definition. Doesn't depend on me, doesn't depend on the panel, it depends on you and only you. Okay, so it's up to you what definition you want to use for hot weather, as long as it is clear, it's unambiguous, and it's measurable. Okay, so the high recorded temperature for the day measured in degrees Celsius. Okay, so that can be our definition. What about violent crime? How will we operationalize our definition of violent crime? Okay, this is our second variable. Okay, we need to define it so that it can be measured. Okay, we can use, for example, the definition of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Okay, so how does the FBI define violent crime? Murder, non-negligent manslaughter, forcible rape, robbery, aggravated assault. These are the examples of violent crime according to the FBI. So, since we already know what these crimes are, we already know what to look for because we've already identified it, right? Okay. So, how do you actually know how many violent crimes were committed on a given day? Because remember, your definition of hot weather is based on a day. So, your violent crime must also be based on a day. They have to coincide, right? Okay. Crime scene in a span of 24 hours. The number of people arrested that day for violent crimes as recorded by the local police. For example, if you just want to study city, a particular city, no, just find out from the police how many arrests were done, how many were arrested for violent crimes. Okay, so that's it. That's your operational definition. Okay, now we have a final definition. We go back to temperature. Temperature was defined as high recorded temperature for the day measured in Celsius. And violent crime was defined as the number of people arrested in a given day for murder, forcible rape, robbery, aggravated assault as recorded by the local police. We now have operational definitions which will guide us. No, it's no longer vague, it's no longer ambiguous. We are very clear on what it is we want to study. Okay? So that's the importance of operational definitions in quantitative research. Otherwise, if you just use the definition in the dictionary, it's no guide. That's why when I check thesis of students, even masteral students, they often make the mistake of using conceptual definitions. Conceptual definitions. They usually use the dictionary. They usually go to Wikipedia. That's not going to guide you. That's not going to guide you at all in your research. Okay? You don't need to define commonly used terms because everybody else knows it. You need to define words that you're actually using specifically in your research. No, like in this case here, temperature, hot weather, and violent crime. Okay, all right. So that's the importance of operationalizing our variables. Okay, so another thing that I want to consider is the need for a theory. That's why when you propose your research, there's always this question: what theory are you going to use? What is a theory? Why do we need that? Why not just do without it? Okay, so let us go back to the variables. Okay, so consider only one variable for now. Okay, let's say your variable is students' grades. Okay, the grades of your students. That's your variable, and that's your variable one. For example, that's your variable one, and you want to find out what affects students' grades. What could affect students' grades? Maybe there are so many things that could affect students' grades. Again, we cannot study all of them. So if you're doing your research, you might just want to consider one thing. No? If you want to be novel, you want to have a unique idea, try to come up with something that might affect students' grades. If you're doing this research, I've encountered this topic so many times already, and those who do research sometimes they just repeat the same things. No? Okay, so if you want to conduct a research on students' grades, you might want to consider other variables that affect students' grades. Huh? Okay, for this example that I want to show you, okay, if we can consider just one. No, we will need to narrow our approach and consider just one thing that affects students' grades, and that can be your topic. Okay, so we fine tune our study. We look for a specific factor that affects students' grades, and that will be our guide. Just like in hot weather and violent crime, we only chose hot weather as a factor, whether or not it affects or it influences the frequency of violent crime. Okay, so all right, so we will need a theory also. We need a theory also to guide us, no? Not just a variable, but also a theory. Okay. So what is the role of the theory? No? The role of the theory is it connects your two variables. It offers an explanation as to why there is a relationship between variable 1 and variable 2. That's the role of your theory. It connects the two variables because you can't just study one thing and another thing. Like, for example, if we reverse the directionality of plant growth and the amount of water, no? Does plant growth affect the amount of water? There is no theory that will explain that, right? Okay, that would be no, that would be out of this world. I don't think there is a theory that exists that can explain that. No? All right. So you need a theory. That's why research professors, your panel will always tell you look for a theory that connects your variables. You need to find the best theory that connects these variables. Okay. All right. So your theory is what offers an explanation as to why one variable influences the other. Okay? We use the theory to focus our attention, no, on a small subset of all potential explanations. Well, there's so many explanations. Okay? But we want to narrow it and focus on one particular viewpoint. All right. So, what is a theory? One of the major purposes of a theory is to provide an answer to the question why. Why? Okay. Okay. I almost said why in Filipino, no, because we always use that. No, we always ask the question why. Why did you do this? No, we're always curious. Okay. All right. It is not just any explanation. It is an idea, an explanation that has become accepted by a wider community of people. No? When there is acceptance, when there is recognition of an idea, It becomes a theory as long as it has not yet been disproven. No? As long as it has not yet been disproven. And a theory is called a theory because it can only explain one aspect. It does not explain everything, about whatever it is that you want to study. Okay? All right. So let's use an example. Let's try to use it. You have students' grades. How about we consider students' sense of self efficacy? What is that? What do you mean by sense of self efficacy? It's when you can say to yourself, I can do it. I can. Just like when Obama said, yes, we can. But if you say you can't, no, you don't have self efficacy, right? Your sense of knowing that you can do something, no? But if you have doubts, I can't do it, it's not something that my strengths will allow me to accomplish or finish, no? That is a lack of self efficacy. So, do you think your self efficacy affects your grades if you're a student? No? What about in general? Do you think students, if they feel confident that they can do something, that their grades will also increase? Perhaps, maybe, we don't know. We want to test it, right? That's why you want to do the research in the first place because you want to find out. Okay, and you use a theory that connects your two variables, and the best theory is the self-efficacy theory. So you use the best theory uh, that you can connect your variables to each other. Okay. So this is just an example. Try to look for a theory. No? Try to look for a theory that connects these two. It's not that easy if you have a novel idea. But if you have a novel idea, that can be your theory. That can be your unique theory. No? You can offer a unique theory to the whole world. And that's what panelists sometimes want. No? They want novelty. No? They want novelty. Because if you're going to study something that's already been studied over and over and over and over, no? What contribution is that to the body of knowledge that we already have, right? There is no contribution because it's been studied. Like the example that I gave the last time is, I always encounter this proposal whether sleep deprivation affects students' grades. I I cannot count anymore how many times I've already encountered that topic, that proposal. Sir, I want to study sleep deprivation. Oh, people who lack sleep get low grades. Okay, but you do know that we already have an answer to that, right? We already know the answer to that. So why ask a question you know the answer to, right? So it makes no sense to ask a question you know the answer to. Okay, so it's just like that. So the panelists, the research panelists that you're trying to convince about your topic will tell that to you. We already know the answer to that. So why do that research in the first place? Okay, anyway, so that's a different topic. All right. So the importance of the theory, okay, it it will guide you in creating your statement of the problem. It will guide you in your methodology, and it will also guide you in the interpretation of your findings. That's why when you interpret your findings, no, if you have a chapter 4 in your thesis, the panel always asks you every time you present a table with your data, add an interpretation and connect it to your theory, connect it to your related literature, right? Because that's what you're studying, whether or not your findings coincide with the theory. If you're not going to connect it to the theory, then why have a theory at all? So you need to connect your findings to the theory. So that's why your theory guides you in your ability to uh, execute your methodology. All right. Okay. And we often hear this theory, theoretical framework. Okay. That's actually how we term theory when we place it in the context of research. Okay. It is still theory. They just made it longer. They called it theoretical framework. No? But actually, it's still theory. So don't be confused. No? What's the difference between theory and theoretical framework? Just the spelling. It's just two words. It's the same. It's the same thing. Okay. Okay. As we have mentioned earlier, it guides you. It helps you plan how you will do your research as well as the interpretation. Okay. It's the basis of your research and how you will analyze your problem. All right. So that ends our discussion about theory. So I hope everything is still okay with you guys. Let's proceed now to another topic. Okay. If your study involves people, of course, I'm assuming that you're all doing research on people. Is there anyone here in studying theoretical physics? because, because I cannot discuss theoretical physics nor chemistry. I'm assuming that you're all studying people. Okay, so if you attended this because you want to to know how to study physics or chemistry, that's an entirely different thing. Okay, we're going to have to do experimentation. All right. Okay. So if you want to study people, no, how do you choose your research participants? Now, again, in the context of quantitative, it's very different when you talk about qualitative. So we will talk about quantitative only here. Okay. So research participants, it is guided by your statement of the problem. That's why sometimes, no, or rather most of the time, your statement of the problem will mention who you are studying. Is it grade 12 students? Is it public school teachers? Right? Is it college students? No? Is it residents in a particular locale? Okay. So your statement of the problem guides you in targeting or in finding out or selecting your research participants. Okay? And your research participants will necessarily come from a particular population. So it's important for you to identify your target population. Research panels will always ask you, okay, so what's your target population? What's your particular population? Okay? So you have a population. And the population is actually a group of people with a common characteristic that you want to study. Okay? All right? Examples of a common characteristic: residents of a subdivision, a particular residential area, grade 11 students of a particular school. That can be your common characteristic. Doctors of a certain field, or people with insomnia. All of these, all of these are common characteristics that can define your population. That's why even your population has to be operationally defined. You cannot just say, I am just going to study that population. What population? The population of everyone. Where? I don't know. Just I want to just study people. You cannot just do that. No, you identify what population you want to study. Because it's up to you. What's your population? And your common characteristic must be guided by your statement of the problem again. That's why research panelists will always go back to your statement of the problem. What's your statement of the problem? Okay, so your statement of the problem says this and that. No? And sometimes their comments, suggestions, and objections arise from your statement of the problem. Okay? Because the statement of the problem guides your research. Everything emanates from that one question, or rather, how many questions you're asking. Maybe there are 4 or 5 questions. They That's the origin of your research, your statement of the problem. Okay, cannot do research without it. Okay, All right. So this is the flow. To identify your population, you need a common characteristic that is being studied by your statement of the problem. Okay. All right. Choosing from the population. So we will now discuss this. Okay. So again, we have a population and you have a group of people with a common characteristic. Okay. You need a sample, just like what we discussed earlier in characteristics of quantitative research. You need a sample. Now, the problem is, how do you get a sample? Why do you even need a sample? Why not the entire population? Yeah, sure, you can study the entire population. Maybe if you spend what? Depends. Huh? Maybe if you can spend 20 years studying the entire population, sure. But of course, you can do that. So we need sampling techniques. We need a sample. Okay. So population, your sample can be derived or obtained using what are called probability sampling techniques. Okay, probability sampling technique. So let's consider what is a probability sampling technique. It is when every member of a population has a known and equal chance of being selected. They all have an equal chance. No? Just like imagine a lottery. Okay. All right. Now we also have non-probability sampling. Okay? The odds of any member being selected cannot be calculated. So it's uneven, meaning not equal chance. No? Some members might have a bigger chance of being selected. So why even consider that? Okay, let's find out later. Why do we need to distinguish between these two things? These two kinds of sampling techniques. Okay? All right. So, selecting a sampling technique, no? What are the factors involved? Okay, the choice of sampling technique will depend on these factors. So if you're already trying to come up with a way to select your sample, these are the things that will usually affect your decision. Okay, how much time do you have? Usually you set a deadline for yourself when you're doing a research, right? So the amount of time, the time that you need will determine what sampling technique. There are some sampling techniques that are time consuming. Okay, your resources, no? Of course, right now, since we have online surveys, it's not really a problem. But before, we had the paper and pen, no? Surveys and questionnaires. You have to go out and give the questionnaires, no? The hard copies. Maybe that's not so much a problem anymore. Resources. Okay. Purpose. What is the purpose of your research? No? Okay. And of course, accessibility. Is your population accessible? Is your population readily identifiable? So these are the four factors that guide your decision in which sampling technique you will use. Okay? Time, resources, purpose, and accessibility of your population. Okay? All right. So let's try to consider now probability sampling. As we have said, probability sampling is when you give an equal chance for each member to be selected for your sample. Okay? So, yeah, okay. So, we have simple random sampling, that's one. We have systematic sampling, that's another. We have stratified random sampling, that's another. And we have cluster random sampling. So, these are the four most common types of probability sampling, which we can discuss in detail here. Okay, let's consider first simple random sampling. And how do we do that? No? We can place, if we're studying people, we've already identified our population. We can write their names and put them in a, what do you call that? Raffle. Raffle. Okay, and then we get the names one by one. Okay, so that will yield a random sample because each name had an equal chance of being selected. Okay, so that's simple random sampling. It's probability, no, because there is no bias. No? When there is bias, there is no probability. Okay. So that's an example of simple random. Of course, there are others, the fishbowl technique, but I'd rather use the raffle. The raffle, I'd call it raffle instead. Instead of fishbowl. Some when I there was this funny story when I was talking about the fishbowl technique, no, putting all the names in a fishbowl and getting the names one by one. And then I was asking students, "Oh, what will you use for your simple random sampling?" And one student said, "Sir, I will use the fishball technique." Yummy fishball technique. So that's a true story, no? The fishball technique. Fishbowl. That's why I just use a raffle. The students will say fishball technique. Okay. Now let's now proceed to systematic sampling. So what's the difference there? This is still probability sampling. So what you can do is this. No, you get a list. If you have 100, if your population is 100, no, and their names are already listed, and you did not make the list. No, make sure you did not make the list. What you can do, if you need 20 from your 100 names, you just get every fifth name from the list. That's already your systematic sample. Why use a raffle when you have a list, right? You have to, the effort. I have to write all the names, 100 names, and then get one name at a time from the raffle. I still have to buy the raffle thing. Okay, systematic sampling. Easier? Maybe. What if there are 100,000 names there? Okay. Now, let's now proceed to stratified random sampling. Okay. Again, when I want a word to be understood, I go back to the root word. Stratified. Strata. Stratum. Strata. There, there must be strata there somewhere, no? Like layers of earth. Strata. Okay. So, look at this. What if this is your population? No? These are college students, and they're taking up different majors, no, degree programs, and you see there a population. No, there are different numbers of students per major. So how will you use stratified random sampling? Okay, is when you need a sample and you group the students according to their major and then obtain a simple random sample from each major. Okay? Maybe you can use proportional stratified random sampling. It will depend on the number of students in each major. No? It's up to you. You can use proportional or not. You can just get 20 from each one. It's up to you. Okay. Of course, you just have to justify it to your panel later. Why didn't you use proportional random sampling? It's up to you. There is no hard and fast rule. There is no rule written on stone. It's up to you as long as you can justify the sampling technique that you are using. Of course, the sampling technique will limit your ability to what? To generalize. That's the only limitation later when you've chosen a sampling technique. Okay? Okay, let's now go to cluster random sampling. Okay, let's say for example, your population is composed of grade 8 sections. So, classes of grade 8 students. And it so happens in a particular school, there are 6 sections. And each section has a different number of students. Okay? And you tell yourself they're all grade 8 students anyway. We don't have ability grouping here. They're all the same. They're all homogeneous sections. So if I just need the sample of 60 students, why do I have to put all their names in a raffle? Why do I have to get a list of all their names and get every so many number of students in the list? Why don't I just make it so easy for me? Now, if I just need 60 from these 195 grade 8 students, why don't I just get 2 sections randomly? That's your cluster random sampling. I've made my life so easy by just doing that. No? Why do I have to put all their names in a raffle? Why do I have to get a list? I just do this. I already have my 60. The end. Okay? So it will depend on the situation. Of course, if there are no sections, no, there you have a problem there. No? Like for example, if your target population is a subdivision, no, what will you use as your clusters? Streets, maybe. It's up to your imagination. Okay? So these are all the probability sampling techniques. Okay. All right. Okay, now we have to consider the correct size of the sample. What is the correct size of the sample? Now, once you have identified your target population, you need to consider a particular formula that will allow you to identify the sample size, the correct sample size. Okay, and this is the formula that we use, the Slovene formula. Now, let me just demonstrate how this is used. No? For example, you've already identified your population, and your population is 1,000. No? This becomes your capital letter N. In the formula, you need a capital letter N. So now you know what that is. No? You have the margin of error, which is usually 0.05. So you just have to square that, and you now have your E squared. Okay? All right. Now, what you do, since you already know everything, no? You just need capital letter N and the small letter E. You can already put it in the formula. No? 1,000. That's your N. And then at the bottom, you just place the values in the denominator, and now you have your sample 286. So easy, right? So just use the Slovene formula, and you now have your sample size. Why do you need this Slovene formula? Because if you don't satisfy this Slovene formula, if you don't satisfy it, you cannot generalize. Imagine to be able to generalize to a population of 1,000, all you need is 286. No? I therefore generalize. No? No, let's say, for example, I'll use that simple example of which is more popular. Is it McDonald's or Jollibee? No? And then I just identify a population of 1,000. Let's say there are 1,000 students in a particular school. I'll just get 286 randomly. It has to be random, of course. And when I survey 286, and what if most of them choose one fast food? I can already generalize. I therefore conclude that in that school, blank is more popular. Uh, since this is being recorded, I cannot. I might be biased. No? Hmm, maybe I'm hungry already. Okay. All right. So non-probability sampling. Oh, I thought we were already done with sampling. We still have non-probability. Okay. So it is easier, quicker, and cheaper. Oh, so why not use non-probability instead? If you use non-probability, you have a problem with generalization. You cannot generalize really, no? Okay. So what are the different kinds of non-probability sampling? You have quota sampling, convenience sampling, purposive sampling, self-selection sampling, and we will discuss these one by one. Okay. Oh, we still have another one, snowball sampling. All right. So let's proceed first to quota sampling. So from the word itself, quota. What is your quota? What is your target number? You're the one who sets the target number. You do not use a Slovene formula here. No? No? For example, if you want to make it more complicated, you can use proportional quota sampling. Let's say you have a population of 10,000. And it so happens you only need a sample size of 100. And you are the one who said that. I just want 100. No, no one will disagree with you. Yeah, that's all you want. No? But of course, if you only have 100, you cannot generalize to the 10,000. That's why quota sampling is sometimes not acceptable to research panelists. No? but it's still an accepted type of non-probability sampling, no? Because you're the one who sets your target sample. Okay? But you want to use proportional. So what do? You know that there are 6,000 females and 4,000 males. So you get a proportional sample from these to come up with your 100. No? What can you do? You get 60 females and you get 40 males. That's it. That's all you need to do. Of course, as I have said earlier, this is usually not acceptable in research, especially in the graduate school. Maybe in senior high school or college, maybe, but not in graduate school. Okay? Let's now go to convenience sampling. From the word itself, convenience, it's very convenient, like the convenience store. No? That's why they call it the convenience store because it's very convenient. It's very close. Okay? So, what, let's say, for example, you only need 100. You only need 100 respondents. So what can you do? You can stand outside a school and give your survey to 100 students who pass you by, and that's it. You've already gotten your convenience sampling. So convenient. Of course, again, you cannot generalize the entire school, no? Because you only got 100. You don't have a Slovene sample. All right. So these are the reasons why non-probability sampling cannot be used to generalize, because he did not satisfy the Slovene minimum. Okay. All right. Just now go to purposive sampling. From the word itself, you have a purpose. What is your purpose? No. So usually your participants will have to satisfy particular criteria. No, because that's the criteria you want to study. No. So what you do is you have to isolate the people or the participants who satisfy that particular criteria. Let's say, for example, you just want to study working students. No, that's your criteria. That's your purpose. No, and that is what will satisfy your purposive sampling. This is acceptable to research panels because you have a purpose. Eh? What if there are not that many working students in a particular school? So you cannot really do a big or get a big sample. Okay? Purposive. All right. So that's it. You have a purpose. Let's now go to another non-probability sampling. Self-selection. So who selects the sample? Themselves. They are the ones who select themselves. No, I volunteer for your study. They have selected themselves. No, how can you get them to volunteer? Of course, you have to announce it. We need volunteers. Okay, so that's what you write in your thesis. No, how did you choose your sample? Self-selection. They volunteered. Okay. Just like when you post a Google Forms survey. No, that's what I did last year in my study on factors affecting willingness to be tested for COVID-19. I just announced it on Twitter, on Facebook, no? And then okay, I need volunteers. Please answer my survey. So they self-selected, no, and based on that, I came up with my own results. Of course, my conclusion is limited to only those people who answered my survey. I cannot generalize. I cannot conclude to the rest of the population. I can only conclude based on the volunteers that I got. So you have to write that in your scope and limitations. Some schools call it delimitations. No? Scope and limitations of your thesis. That no, you only used self-selection as your sampling technique. Okay, let's now go to snowball sampling. Okay, what is snowball sampling? When your participants are not readily identifiable, that's when you use snowball sampling. Just like I have this advisee, this teacher who is now doing her masteral thesis, and she was asking me, "Sir, I need to conduct my phenomenological study on survivors of COVID-19." But I only know six of them. I need more. So you need to do snowball sampling. Maybe these COVID 19 survivors know other COVID 19 survivors, and they can refer these strangers to you because you don't know them. So they're strangers. No? So I told the graduate student, no, maybe you can, yeah, do use your snowball sampling. No, your uh, your six your six might know more COVID 19 survivors, and you can interview them also. Okay, so that's snowball sampling. Usually, you cannot. Of course, you won't know who the COVID 19 survivors are, no, because there is medical privacy. No, the doctors and hospitals will not list their names. No, these are the people who have COVID. No, so you don't know. That's why you need help in finding out, finding more of your participants. Okay, so there you have it, the sampling techniques that you can use in selecting your participants. Okay, so probability, non-probability, it's entirely up to you what you want to use, as long as you can justify it to your research panel. Okay, all right. So let's now go to the four major types of quantitative research. Oh, so now we're in the quantitative research already. Finally, that's what you've been waiting for. Okay, so we have the descriptive, we have the correlational, we have the quasi experimental, and we have the experimental. Okay, so these are
Uh,
the four.
Dr.
Four.
Fabella,
Yes.
you might want to take 5 minute break
Oh, sure, sure,
I
sure.
think
Okay, so
so.
yeah, okay. So,
because I think we're all having a headache.
oh, okay, okay,
Would you
sure.
like guys to have a 5 minute break at
Yes,
least?
sir.
Yeah.
All right. So while having the
Okay.
five
Okay
minute
po.
break,
Yes, sir.
you can turn off your camera and we'll just resume after 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Please be back after 5 minutes. Hello, shall we resume?
Yes, I'm here.
All right. We are still listening to the lecture of Dr. Fabella regarding writing quantitative research. Thank you so much, Dr. Fabella. The floor is yours.
Okay, so that was a good break. So we all needed a break. All right. So let's proceed. So let me know if the slides are still in your screen.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. So we will now proceed to the discussion on the different types of quantitative research. So these are the four basic types of quantitative research, and we will try to go through them one by one. Let's consider first the descriptive type. Okay, so descriptive research questions simply aim to describe the variables you are measuring. Once you already have your variable, you just want to describe. No, you can do so when you have already quantified the variables. Okay. For example, how many calories does a teenager consume each day? Okay, so this is just description. It's like a survey. No? But for our purposes, let's try to go deeper. Let's try to consider a less simple example. Okay, let's do comparative descriptive. Yeah. Okay. So, is there a difference between the calorie consumption of male and female teenagers? So now we have descriptive comparative. We're still describing, but this time we are describing and comparing males and females or male and female teenagers when it comes to calorie consumption. So again, this is a very basic example just so that you get an idea of how this is done. Okay, so let's try to come up with a concept of how we would do this kind of research. No? So of course, you have to first identify your population. What is your population? It's teenagers, right? And where will you get your teenager population? Maybe in a particular subdivision, a residential area. It's up to you where you want to find your teenagers. No? Okay, and then you obtain a sample. You obtain a sample from your population. No? You may use stratified random sampling because you have males and females. Males and females. If you remember the example before, 10,000, then you get 6,000 males, 4,000 female, 6,000 females, 4,000 males, and then you just get a proportional sample. Okay, and then you gather your data. Just find out how much what is their calorie consumption, and then what you may administer a survey. Of course, this becomes a bit of a challenge. If teenagers don't know the calorie content of what they are eating, but this is just for um, demonstration purposes only. Assuming that they do know the calorie content of what they're eating, we can actually ask them. Okay, and then you analyze your data. How do you do that? You compare the consumption of males and females using statistical treatment. So later we will be discussing an overview of statistical treatment. And then, is there a difference? Is there a difference between the calorie consumption between male and female teenagers? Because that's our statement of the problem in the first place. Is there a difference? Okay. All right. So that's just our concept, now how we will proceed with this particular type of quantitative research. Okay. So let's now consider another type of research, which is correlational. From the word relation, is there a relationship? No. Okay. It is tries to establish whether there is a relationship, whether or not there is a relationship between the variables that you want to study. Of course, you need to have already identified whatever variables you are trying to connect to each other. For example, is there a relationship between intelligence quotient and clinical depression? Oh, this is very interesting. No, the smarter you are, would you be more depressed? Or the smarter you are, the less depression you get, no? Or your level of depression. No? Maybe it has something to do with your intelligence. Are intelligent people more or less depressed? That's your curious question. Okay. All right. So let's try to come up with a concept. No. So first, you identify again your population. I don't know what population you want to study. It's up to you. No, maybe it's a school, maybe it's a college, maybe it's uh, again a residential area or a company. Maybe it's a company. Okay, and then you obtain a sample. So applying everything that we have learned already, about sampling, probability sampling, and all that. Okay, you may use simple random sampling depending on your population, and then you gather your data. How will you gather your data? You may administer two tests, an IQ test and a depression test. So, for your sample, no, you will have to give them an IQ test, find out their IQ score, and then you give them a depression test, find out their depression scale score. Okay, and then you analyze your data. How do you do that? You correlate the scores using statistical treatment. Okay, so that's it. And then you find out, is there a relationship. Your statistical treatment will be the one to determine whether or not there is a relationship. Okay, so that's the flow. That's the flow of your research. No, okay. So remember that the flow is actually what guides you. No, and chapter one, chapter two, chapter three, depending on what format you're using. That's just the form. This is the substance. The steps that you see right now, this is the actual substance of your research. The form, whether you're writing chapter one, two, three, four, that's just form. No? No, the substance is more important than form. Okay, all right. And form usually depends on the institution or the school or the university you are connected with. Okay, so let's now go to quasi-experimental. Why is it called quasi? Because it looks like an experiment, but it is actually not. That's why quasi means, no, it's not really, like this. It's not really an experiment. No? Quasi-experimental. No? It lacks certain requirements that are necessary in order to be able to say that that study is actually experimental. Okay, so it involves some degree of manipulation, no, of the independent variable to see how it affects the dependent variable. So there is some measure of control, but the measures of control are not complete as compared to experimental. Okay, so let's have an example. Is there a difference in the levels of stress before and after a stress management session? So you want to find out, is your stress management session effective? So this is a pre-test, post-test design that falls under quasi-experimental. Okay, pre-test, post-test design. So let's try to see the concept. How will we execute this? No? Okay, so again, you identify your population and then you obtain a sample. No, again, you can use run simple random sampling, and then after that, you will gather your data. How will you do that? You administer first your stress questionnaire, no, to your sample, no, and you note the scores, and then afterwards you administer the treatment. What is the treatment? The stress management technique. Okay, so you give a questionnaire first and administer the stress management technique after you give the stress questionnaire. And then after the stress management technique, you administer the same stress questionnaire and note the scores. Okay, and you compare the scores before and after the stress management technique. That's it. That's the concept. That's the flow of a quasi-experimental design using pre-test, post-test. Okay, so all right. Okay, so Let's now proceed to the last one, experimental. No, you actually conduct an experiment. You have to fulfill all the requirements of experimentation. No, and this is already a subject of and by itself. No? Experimentation is a semester subject. How do you conduct experiments? Okay, so in experimental research, there is optimal level of control. That's why when you hear the word experiment, you usually imagine a laboratory, right? Because back in elementary and high school, no, we did experiments in a laboratory because there needs to be optimal level of control. Why? Because there are extraneous variables that can affect your variables, and you don't want them, no? Otherwise, your extraneous variable will pollute your results. That's why you need controls. Okay? For example, is there a difference in the math test scores between subjects who are exposed to music and those who are not? In the subject that I teach, experimental psychology, this is one of the more popular experiments that students have done. No? Whether or not music affects, no, your ability to score high in a particular test. Okay, so let's consider the concept. How will we do this? This is a bit more complicated. No? So experimentation is a subject of and by itself. So you identify first your population. You obtain your sample. It's up to you how you obtain your sample again, and then you divide your sample randomly between your control group and your experimental group. Now, take note that this is also the experimental design that is used to find out whether a COVID-19 vaccine is effective. It is also the same experimental design that is used whether or not a new medicine or drug is effective against a particular sickness or illness. No? You have an experimental group and a control group. No? I don't know if you've already heard of the term placebo. Okay, this is how you do that. Clinical trials involving medicine. Okay, so you have a control group and you have an experimental group. So again, we're studying two variables here, music and math test scores. So how do you do this? You don't expose the control group to music because they are the control group, and then you have the experimental group. No, they're the ones that you expose to the music because you're experimenting on them. That's why they're called experimental. In control group, nothing happens to them, so they're the boring group. No, the experimental group is the exciting group. That's what you want to really consider. But the experimental group is useless without a control group. So you cannot just have an experimental group. No, you need a control group also. So you give the math test to the control group. No, they have no music in their classroom. You give the math test. But in the experimental group, there is music playing, no, in the classroom, and you also give the same math test. No? That's how you do it, and then is there a difference in the scores? So that's it. That's how you do the experiment. That this is your concept. This is actually easier said than done. This is a very difficult research design, very strict controls. No? There are so many things that can affect it. That's why it has to be done carefully. No? Okay, so experimentation. All right. So those are the four types, the four major types of quantitative research. Uh, Basic. These are the basic types. Okay. Now, we mentioned earlier that if you really want to quantify your variables, you need to be able to measure the variables well. No? Quantification involves measurement, and how will you know if you're actually measuring the variable that you want to study? How will you know if your measurement is actually accurate and true? This is where the concept of validity comes in. That's why you might have already encountered the concept or the idea that your instrument or your questionnaire or your survey or whatever it is that you're going to use must be validated. So, for purposes of our understanding of of validation, we will have to consider what is validity, and we will also consider the concept of reliability, because a lot of students who conduct research, they just go through the motions of validation, but they don't even know what it's for. Why do I need to validate it? It's a questionnaire, so what? No, I made it. No, why is my questionnaire wrong? Maybe that's why you need to find out, is it valid? All right. Okay. So that's one of the nuances of quantitative research. Is your measurement valid? Okay, let's find out. So it was Kelly who invented the idea of validity. No? And for example, in a construct like intelligence, how are you so sure? How will you be sure that you're actually measuring intelligence? No? What if you're measuring something else? What if it's just memory? Or is memory part of intelligence? Hmm, interesting question. No? Is it? If you memorize something, is that intelligence? No? I uh, I have this idea. What if you had What if you have perfect memory? What if you have perfect memory and you memorize all the possible answers to all the possible questions? Your memory is perfect. You're a computer. You're like a walking Google, no? And you're given a board exam. You will perfect the board exam because you have perfect memory. But does that mean you are intelligent, or are you just good at memorizing? See, there's a very big difference there. No? You can memorize all the answers, but do you understand them? You can memorize all the questions, but do you understand the questions? That's the example being given here. Is intelligence different from memory? Anyway, let's go back to validity. So we need to make a distinction between internal and external validity. Okay, so we will find that out later. So what is internal validity? Whether the effects observed in the study are due to the manipulation of the independent variable and not some other factor. Okay, so the internal validity actually touches on the causal relationship, the cause and effect. Okay, all right. Internal validity can be improved by controlling extraneous variables, etc. So these are the technical terms. Okay, so let's consider now the types of validity. So there are different types. No? So we have content related validity, and we have criterion related validity. Oh no, this is so technical. Okay, we will explain this in very basic terms. First, we will consider face validity. Does the test appear to test what it aims to test? No? Does it on its face look valid? No? That's face validity. So, face validity at face value. No? And it's the least sophisticated measure of validity. And it's usually not really used much, no? But we will consider it just the same. Okay. All right. Okay. Does that look like a math test? If it looks like a math test, then it must have face validity. That's it. Oh, it looks like a math test. It must be a math test. So that is face validity. That's it. That's all that face validity is. It must measure mathematical skill because it looks like a math test. Okay? So very simple, no? Face validity. The other types of validity are more complicated. Construct validity. As I mentioned earlier, when you define a construct, no, like behavior or like thoughts and things that go on inside the mind of a person, that's a construct. No? These are concepts that have been invented. And construct validity, does the test relate to the underlying theoretical concepts that define the construct? Okay, all right. Okay, and to test construct validity, it must be demonstrated that the phenomenon being measured actually exists. Does it actually exist, that construct that you have mentioned? No? So let's try to explain it further. Okay, for example, intelligence. Does intelligence actually exist? There are so many different kinds of theories on intelligence. No? And construct validity is when the theory that you have used to identify or define intelligence is the one that is being used as measurement for intelligence. Okay, so I'll give a very basic example of construct validity. Motivation. The concept of motivation, that is an invented word. No, it is an invented word. Does it really exist? Now, how can I be sure that it really exists? It can it be measured? No? Yeah. If it can be measured, then maybe it exists. But what about chakra? Does chakra exist? You've heard of the word chakra, right? No? If it cannot be measured, no, maybe it does not exist. How can I measure chakra? No? How can I see it, feel it, touch it? No, I cannot measure it. So maybe it does not exist. So the construct of chakra, no, cannot cannot be defined. There's no theory defining it, so I cannot really measure that. No. Whereas motivation, we all know there are so many theories of motivation. No? Like Abraham Maslow's no, theory of motivation, hierarchy of needs, all that. Okay. All right. So we're now done with uh, content related validity. Let's now proceed to criterion related validity. This is concurrent validity, the first type. Now, does it relate to existing similar measure? Okay. Is the degree to which a test corresponds to an external criterion that is known concurrently. Okay? So wow, so technical. Well, what you usually do to find out concurrent validity is you compare it with a currently existing criterion. No? Okay. Very often, for example, you have a new test. Let's say you're ambitious. You want to invent a new test, a new measure. You are going to be the one to create the survey questionnaire. How will you know if what you created is actually will actually measure what you want to measure? No? You need to establish concurrent validity. All right. Okay. So example, in 1965, Rosenberg invented the self-esteem scale. So this is a questionnaire that measures self-esteem, and until now, it is being used. Even in fact, I actually used it in a recent research that I did. Okay, so it's still very much alive. But what if, for example, in 2006, another kind of self-esteem test was invented? No? Now, how will I know if I am the one who invented this? How will I know if it actually measures self-esteem as well? How will I know? I have to what? I have to give these same tests to the same people. Give the same tests to the same people. No, the Rosenberg test and the Sorensen self-esteem test, and find out, do the people who score high in Rosenberg score high also in Sorensen? Do the people who score low in Rosenberg also score low in Sorensen? There is concurrent validity. That's why when you invent a new test, it's very difficult. No, it's very difficult. You have different statistical treatment for this. If you're inventing your own test, okay, concurrent validity is what you want to establish. Okay, so usually people don't invent their own. No? They just use existing ones so that they don't have to prove concurrent validity. But if you want to become famous, you want your name on the test, no? You write there your name, self-esteem test. No? You become famous there. And thousands of people will be using your test. No? All right, so concurrent validity. Okay, let's now proceed to predictive validity. All right. Does the test predict later performance on a related criterion? Okay. So this is very useful, no, because you want to predict the behavior of a person. No? Predictive validity. Okay. But predictive validity, actually, for you to be able to prove this, you must travel into the future. or you have to wait years before you find out whether or not it is actually able to predict. So this will have to involve longitudinal study. No, I give you a test now, and this test predicts you'll be so and so in the future. I have to wait for the future to find out if my prediction is correct. Predictive validity, right? Takes a long time. No, no, takes a long time to prove. For example, the very common tests that are used to that have predictive validity are aptitude tests. Aptitude, they try to predict your performance, in the future, right? Okay, all right. So that's predictive validity. We now go to reliability. Okay, so reliability, if you will notice, is not really so much a problem in research, but just the same, we would like to discuss this so that we also have an idea of what reliability is. Reliability is consistency of the results. No, look at that weighing scale there. Imagine if you weigh yourself in the morning and you weigh, let's say, 100 pounds. And then in the afternoon, you weigh yourself. You now weigh 120 pounds. And then at night, you weigh yourself again and you weigh again. You now weigh 80 pounds. Now, how can you say now that your weighing scale is reliable? Or will you believe, oh, I'm gaining and losing weight all in one day? Wow, what's happening to me? Now, maybe you'll just believe that the weighing scale is trash. No, you just throw away the weighing scale. Why? It's useless. It's not reliable. So same thing with tests. Now, when you want to measure a construct, now you want to measure your variable, it has to be reliable as well. No, the measurement has to be reliable. Not only must it be validity, it must also be reliable, consistency. Okay? All right. So there is also internal and external reliability, and we will just touch on this now. So internal reliability has something to do with consistency across the items of the test. Okay, external reliability has something to do with one another. No? Okay, so let's look at the types of reliability. You have internal and you have external. So let's look at the split half method. Let's say, for example, you have a questionnaire and you want to find out, is it internally reliable? No? Is it internally reliable? No? Do all the parts of the test measure your variable? Do they all contribute equally to the measurement of the variable? So how do you find out whether or not there is internal reliability? No, you compare one half of the test to the other half. No? And you can split the test in two and find out whether or not they both come up with the same score. No, kasi it would be weird if the test has different results if you split it in half. No, so let's try to demonstrate that here. For example, you have a 10-item test. Yeah, you have a 10-item test. So what you do is you split it in half. You get all the odd numbers, you get all the even number items, and then you give the odd number items to the people, and then you also give the even number items to people, and then you compare the results. No, they must both, if a person scores high in the odd, the person must also score high in the even. It would be weird if a person scores high in the odd and scores low in the even. No? So this establishes internal reliability. No? Split half method. Okay. So let's now proceed to test retest. Test retest measures the stability of a test over time. All right. All right. So this assesses external consistency. No. All right. Okay, so let's proceed to, so this measures stability of a test over time. So let's proceed to the example. You can give the test on two separate occasions. So let's find out, and we can find out if the results are similar. Okay, let's look at how we are going to do the test retest. So I have a group of students, no, first testing session, no, and then you let time pass. I don't know, maybe it's just a few hours, maybe it's 1 day, no, and then you give the same test, second testing session, no, that's test retest. Find out if the results are still the same, no. If the results are not that different, no, then you have consistency over time. Okay. Okay, so just compare the results. If the scores are wildly different, no, then there is no reliability here. Okay. Okay, and then we have the inter-rater reliability. This has something to do with the people who rate a particular variable. Inter-rater, no, the degree to which different raters give consistent estimates of the same behavior. All right. So, for example, in interviews, no, that's why sometimes when you apply for a job, instead of just one interviewer, you have three. Have you ever experienced that? There are three people interviewing you all at the same time. It's to eliminate bias. What if, no, the job applicant is a girl and you're a guy, and because the girl is pretty, you're hired. There is there's bias there. But what if there are three of you and two of the other interviewers are girls? No? Maybe there will be no bias there. Okay, so that's it. That's how you do it. Oh, you have if these three people will all agree that you did well, no, using the same rubrics, no, do the raters evaluate consistently? Because if they don't, no, the rubrics, there's something wrong with the rubrics. No, that's there's nothing wrong with the panel. There's something wrong with the rubrics. Okay, because the rubrics are not reliable, because you're going to have different results there. So that is called inter-rater reliability. No, if you have more than one rater involved. Okay. Actually, that actually ends my discussion on quantitative research. So it's already 11:30. So we can probably proceed now to whatever questions you have. You might have been reserving. Okay. So, Sir Mark, I've already ended my crash course on quantitative research.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fabella. Now you can write in the chat box your questions, or should you wish, you can open your mic or just raise your hand so that I'll be facilitating the open discussion. Do we have questions? Please write on the chat box. Okay. You might have same questions. Sir,
Yeah,
the
can I
first
have
question.
questions?
Yes, sir.
Sir, my name from Cambodia. As you described earlier, that there are four types of quantitative uh, research, like descriptive, correlation, quasi-experimental, and experimental. I just would like you to explain me about the quasi-experimental factors.
Okay, so all right, so we will, if you will allow me, I will go back to the slide. Okay, all right. So let me just look for the slide on, because this presentation has 438 slides. So give me a moment to look for it. All right, so just so that you have something to look at.
Again, others may write their questions on the chat box, and then I'll read it for Dr. Fabella later after he answers question of Sir, how should I pronounce your name?
You can call me Visna, doctor. Can call me Visna.
Visna,
Visna.
sir. Nice
Yes,
meeting you,
yes.
sir.
Yes, nice to meet you all too. Yes.
So while waiting for Dr. Fabella's answer, uh, since this is a research writing series, Dr. Fabella will be back at Powerhouse Scholastic Center on April 11 for the qualitative research writing this time. So if you still wish to join us on April 11, that falls still on a Sunday, Dr. Fabella will be discussing the other side of research writing, which is qualitative. So announcements will be posted on our official Facebook page. Please follow, like, and share our Facebook page. That's Powerhouse Scholastic Center. Dr. Fabella?
Okay, so can you hear me? Is my microphone
Yes,
on?
sir.
Okay, so
Yes, doctor. Yes.
using this very basic example of quasi experimental. So this is a pre-test post-test design. Okay, so there are other quasi experimental designs, no? But this is the one that is very common. This is actually the one used in action research. If you've encountered the term action research, no? Pre-test post-test design. So your question, would you like to uh, to state your question, sir?
I think Sir
Okay, doctor.
Vespa would like. Yeah, sir.
Okay, we just want to make sure how the quasi experimental work because it is look like a new term for us. We just want to know how does it work.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, maybe it's not a familiar term because a lot of the textbooks just go by the name pre-test post-test design, which actually falls under quasi-experimental. Okay, and the example that I gave for quasi-experimental is the pre-test post-test. It's called quasi-experimental because it looks like an experiment, but actually it's not because there are less controls involved in as compared to experimental where there are many controls involved. Okay, so here in quasi experimental there are actually other designs, like for example if you want to find out the effect of a particular disaster on a group of people, no? So you have to look for a disaster first and then find the victims of that disaster. Like, for example, if it's an earthquake, then you want to find out whether or not they're experiencing insomnia. So that's another kind of quasi experimental design that's very different from pre test, post test. So here, I just used the pre test, post test as an example of quasi experimental. But there are actually many more. This is the most popular among the quasi-experimental. So you just have the pre-test and the post-test and the treatment in between. Okay, so don't be scared or confused about the name. Some textbooks use the name quasi-experimental. Some textbooks just use the name pre-test post-test design. Okay, I hope I answered your question.
Yes, thank you, doctor. Yes, thank you, doctor.
Okay,
Thank you.
so thank you for that question. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. I just go through other questions before I'll entertain Sir Suman. Other questions, Sir Fabella? This comes from Sir Romel Arsenas. Sir, what is the minimum and maximum question appropriate to raise in conducting research to your sample or to your sampling?
Okay, so I'm trying to understand the question. Is the question about your statement of the problem? How many problems can you have in one research? Because it will depend on the institution. It will depend on the level of the study that you are attempting to conduct. Usually, we have more than one research problem. Like for example, what is the profile of the participants, and then after that you ask another question about your variable one, and you ask another question about your variable two, and then you ask, is there a relationship between variable one and variable two? So usually in the graduate school, you have more than one research problem. Uh, Sometimes I see four or even five research questions. For example, if I want to use, let me know if I'm actually answering your question, because that's how I understood the question. Now, okay, let me just go back to variables. Now, if, for example, I have two variables here. So let me just look for the slide so that you can see. Okay. So all right. Let me just present the slide so we can look at it together. Okay, so here you have a descriptive comparative. In your descriptive comparative, if you are trying to frame your research problem or your statement of the problem, you will probably start with, what is the profile of your participants, your research respondents, or your, depends on the school or the institution how you call them. They may be respondents, participants, they may be informants, they may be research subjects. It's up to the school. So you will come up with the first question: what is the profile of your respondents? And then next, what is the calorie consumption of males? What is the calorie consumption of females? And then, is there a difference in the calorie consumption of males and females? So you know, for research questions there. So you frame it one by one. You frame it one by one so that your reader as well as your research panel can see which problem you're answering. You're answering them one at a time, instead of just going immediately to the question, is there a difference between the calorie consumption of male and female teenagers? Because so what I did is I just summarized everything into one statement of the problem. Okay, so it's up to your variables actually, and the institution. So I hope did I understand the question or correctly, or do you meant to ask a different question, Sir Rommel?
Sir Romel, please comment on the chat box. Was Dr. Fabella able to answer your question? Yes. According to Sir Romel, Dr. Fabella, yes. Okay,
Okay, so thank
another
you for that question.
question from Sir Irvin, but this is a different story. Good morning, sir. I have a question. Where does action research come into play? And may I know its concept or steps? As regards concept, action research, Dr. Favela will still have a talk on that. Again, this is a research writing series. Actually, you missed our first, which is writing research proposal. Happened, I think, first week of March. Dr. Fabella's talk on action research will be sometime in May. So, Sir Irvin, we'll keep you posted once Dr. Fabella is up for the action research writing already. We'll keep you informed, sir. Uh,
Thank
Next,
you, sir.
sure po. Sir Mar, how can measure the dependent variable? How can we measure the dependent variable? Sir Mar,
Okay, so yeah, it depends on the dependent variable. First, you have to identify your dependent variable. If it's a construct, human behavior construct, no, you have to find out if there are existing instruments that can measure it. No, I'll use the example of self-esteem as I used earlier in the slides. No, self-esteem is measurable because there are instruments that are already being used to measure self-esteem. So if you're going to use self-esteem as a dependent variable, then maybe you can use the existing instruments. You just have to ask for permission if the author of the instrument will allow you to use it. But there are some instruments out there that are open access. You can use them without permission as long as you cite them, no? As long as you cite them as the source of your instrument. So again, it depends on the variable. If there are existing instruments, then you're in luck. But if there are no existing instruments, you might have to come up with your own. Now, a researcher made instrument, and that's very time consuming. You have to conduct your pilot testing and all that, no? And validation. Okay.
Thank you, Dr.
Okay, I hope I answered your question.
Then next question is from Sir Suman. Sir, you're raising your hand. Now I can recognize you. Although you're not the sir, the training PPT of Dr. Fabella. Is that your main concern, sir?
No, I want to ask some different questions actually.
Yeah. Can we? Actually, after this lecture, maybe by tomorrow, because today is a Sunday, we'll take a rest after the seminar in training. We'll be sending you recorded lecture of Dr. Fabella today. So this is recorded. So we'll be sending you a copy together with your certificate of completion and your acknowledgement receipt. Our marketing officer will do that tomorrow. So
Okay, thank you.
thank you. That's
Can I ask one question to sir?
yes, sir.
Sir, I want to ask about the sample size. I mean, what formula you show me? Is there only one formula to define the sample size, or if have any another formula after define the sample size? What is the lowest limit for sample size?
Okay, so to be safe, this is the Slovene formula is actually the more popular and more used formula. But I'm sure there are other formulas out there, and it will depend on the institution. I cannot really say that the Slovene formula will be the one that will be used by your school or college or institution where you are studying or working at. But back home here in the Philippines, this is the formula that we always encounter and use. That's why I discussed the Slovene formula. But I'm sure it's safe to use as long as your panel or your research professor will approve the Slovene formula because it's already a tried and tested formula. Yeah.
Okay, sir. Sir, can I ask one more question, please?
Yes,
Sure,
Sir,
sir.
yeah, for quantitative research, for using software, normally what is the best tool for software analysis?
Actually, you have different softwares available, no? And in fact, I've encountered so many. If you Google, there are so many statistical software that is available, no? Of course, for some the more popular is SPSS, but again, it's up to you if you want to use that. You just Google it. No? In fact, there are online statistical applications that you can actually use for free. So you don't even need to use the one that you need to buy. As long as when you conduct your research, you can show, maybe add it in the appendix, no, at the end of your research, that you can show how it was calculated, what application or website or online application that you use to compute your results.
Okay, got it, sir. Sir, you have any training for research methodology?
I think this is one. No, Dr. Fabella.
Maybe you can suggest, no, because we can also address the demand, no, the need. If there is a need for
Yes.
a particular topic, you can suggest to Sir Mark. Sir Mark is the one in charge. Yeah, and we can schedule it. Can
I'm the
schedule.
one in charge for programs here at Powerhouse. So if you, I think you would receive our reminders to your Gmail last night. You can just send me there. Should there be a particular research method that you wish to know more, and then we can schedule a talk again with Dr. Fabella. And it would be better if you can invite your friends, so that would be a bigger group also.
Yeah, thank you, sir. It will great if you arrange one program for research proposal also.
Ah, wow. We've done that, but I think we'll make an arrangement, Sir Suman. I'll just send to my email whatever your specific needs are, and then we'll make an arrangement.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Thank you also. Another question, three last questions from Ma'am Emily. Uh, do you accept research consultancy, sir? That would be that would be between you and Dr. Fabella po. What we can do is to connect you to Dr. Fabella, because that's a different thing already. Uh, we are thankful that you are recognizing the skills and the ingenuity of our speakers that makes really our center powerhouse. So we'll connect you to Dr. Fabella, and then you can have the consultation with him. As to his professional fee, he can discuss it he can also discuss it with you in private, because Powerhouse is no longer interfering with those matters. We respect the privacy between Dr. Fabella and his clients outside Powerhouse. Yun. Then, according to Sir Macareg, can we get Dr. Fabella as co-supervisor? I think a consultant also, yes. Sir Ram, I'll send you the directory of Dr. Fabella so that he can discuss with you also your particular study. But as regards concern of Sir Suman, research proposal writing and other methods, just send me, sir, so that we can make some arrangement. Then from Ma'am May Ramos, I guess this is still a different story, and it will take time. That it will take time to answer. May I know what is the updated content of a thesis paper, chapter by chapter? Ma'am, we'll try our very best to offer basics of research writing, and hopefully we can see you there. Because I'm seeing centers who are doing the same. Then, Sir Vesna has concerned or has a suggestion here. Can we create one Telegram group so that we can keep our relation, communication, and strength each other? I'll try to do a group chat, sir. Hopefully, everyone can join. And, Sir IGC, does the adapted questionnaires from the other research still undergo validity and reliability, Dr. Fabella?
Okay, this is a very good question. First of all, if it's already used in a research, it is assumed that that particular instrument or questionnaire has already undergone validation. But to be sure, you have to go and read the part of the research that says this instrument has already undergone validation, no? Content validation, pilot testing, and all that. No, if you can read it there, then it's already valid. The next step is to ask for permission from the person who actually created the instrument, because if it's a researcher made, it's the property of the person who made it. So just ask for permission. It's up to the person now if that person will allow you to use it. No? So that's it. It's already valid and reliable as long as it's already indicated in the research.
All right. More questions? Let me check. How many references are accepted for a research, Dr. Fabella?
References. Okay. It's a very subjective question. Again, it will depend on the institution, the school, the university that you are connected with. or that you are enrolled in. It's very variable. It does there is no actual minimum. No? Of course, the more the better, but sometimes if you include more and more, sometimes the studies are no longer connected with the topic. So you have to make sure that it is actually related to the topic, because that the research panel, the ones that will actually evaluate your research, will also go through that. Oh, is this related? Why is this here? No, the important thing is it's whether or not it has something to do with your topic, and whether or not it's recent. No, 5 to 10 years old. The more recent, the better. Okay, so it has nothing to do really with quantity. It has something to do with quality, whether it's connected to your topic and whether or not it's recent.
Thank you, Doc. It's 11:51. Last two questions. Let me read. Second to the last question from Sir Vesna. If the questionnaire for one variable has only three items, do we need to do the reliability test to drop some items?
Well, I have not yet encountered a questionnaire that only has three items. Maybe yeah, I'm curious now how the least number that I've encountered is 10 items. No? Three, I'm not sure whether or not that will actually measure anything, no? Especially if it's quantitative. It's closed-ended, right? You have choices there. So again, what you do is you study the literature of how that questionnaire was made, so that you know whether or not it's valid. And if it is valid, you don't even have to validate it anymore. Okay, so it will depend on the background of the particular research instrument. Okay, so I hope I answered that question.
Uh, so can I talk a little bit? I know time is consuming. Time is very short now, but my question, I found one variable I will be used in my conceptual frameworks, and that one variable have only three questionnaire items.
Mhm.
This is the original. The original have only three questionnaire items, and some are the variable have like more than 20 items. So I think that the one that with more than 20 items, I have to do the reliability test in order to drop some questionnaire before bring the final one to interview. But for some one variable, I see only three questionnaire items. So this one, do I need to do the reliability test to bring the final one to interview, or I do not need because it has only three questionnaire items?
Yeah, as I have mentioned earlier, what you need to do is you need to find out the background, the history, how that questionnaire was made, why it's only three questions, and if three questions are enough to measure a particular construct or the variable itself. So if the background of that particular questionnaire explains clearly how it was validated and why it's only three questions, then there's no need to do anything more. You can already use it as long as you can get the permission to use that questionnaire. So it's just curious because it only has three questions. So maybe we'll understand it better if we could see it, but we don't have time to look at all these details. Okay.
Okay, thank you, doctor. Thank you.
Okay, there is a question here, sir. I think I don't know if Sir Mark dropped from the connection, but while waiting for him, I think we can also try to answer this question. What is the minimum indicators statement in the questionnaire per variable or subvariable? It will actually depend on what you want to study. No? For example, in the descriptive comparative that I was using earlier, no, you want to compare the calorie consumption of male teenagers and female teenagers. So I can imagine at least four questions there. no? And if you actually want to address a recommendatory question, you can also add that. What recommended recommendations can you make based on the findings? Usually, we have that in the research problems. Sir Mark, welcome back po.
Sorry, I lost connection. All right, so I think that ends the question and answer. More questions? Appreciate if you would write on the chat box feedback regarding the seminar today. Uh, write your feedback also regarding how did our center well so far. How did Powerhouse Scholastic Center hold the training? Were you able to learn something from us? The way we learn a lot from Dr. Fabella. Again, we would appreciate if you can send us feedback how well our center is so far. Now, we're inviting you to attend to our still on lecture series of Dr. Fabella, research writing, happening on April 11. That would be qualitative research writing. And then later of the same month would be research article writing. So once you're done with your thesis, you might want to publish it in an international journal. So Dr. Fabella will discuss how to do it. And then the last part of the series would be writing action research. Thank you so much. So just give me 1 minute. I'll just present the certificate of appreciation to Dr. Fabella. 1 moment, please. Allow me to read the citation of the certificate. Kindly open your mic to everyone. I opened your camera again as courtesy to Dr. Fabella. The certificate of appreciation is awarded to Frederick Edward T. Fabella, PhD, for his selfless, valuable contributions as lecturer during the quantitative research writing workshop held on March 28, 2021 via digital platform, given this 28th of March 2021. Signed by Engineer Danny J. Rumpun, signed by Edward Rich Bayangos, our marketing officer, and signed by yours truly, Mark Paul Castro, the program head. Again, from Powerhouse Scholastic Center and to all who attended today, thank you very much, Dr. Fabella. Can we give him a round of applause, please?
Thank you, everyone. Nice to meet all of you. I hope to see you again.
Thank you, sir.
Can we have a photo op, please? Kindly open your camera and at least 2 seconds. Let's take picture as a remembrance that we all met today because tomorrow would be again ECQ here in Metro Manila. So we can't go out. So instead of, so while making ourselves away from any harm, we're learning new skills, and one of which is writing quantitative research. Once again, from the Powerhouse Scholastic Center, maraming salamat po in Tagalog. I hope those new friends that we met today from Cambodia have understood it. So 3 seconds to for photo op only. Please open your camera. I'll just count 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. Once again, that ends our quantitative research writing workshop today. Please like, share, and follow our Facebook page. That's www.facebook.com/Powerhouse Scholastic Center. Hopefully, we could still see you in the succeeding trainings that we offer. Please keep yourselves updated because we'll be posting a lot of training still. We'll be offering development training. That would be modular. We'll be offering trainings that are related to business. But of course, our core would remain the research writing and other educational related matters. From Powerhouse Scholastic Center and on behalf of the two board of directors, this has been Sir Mark saying thank you so much and I'm signing off. Happy Sunday everyone and please stay safe.
Yeah, stay
Thank you
safe,
po.
everyone. Good luck.
Thank you. Nice meeting
Thank you,
you,
Doc
sirs from
Abelia.
Cambodia.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Thank you po.
Nice to
Thank
meet you all. Nice to
you.
meet you all. Bye
Bye.
bye.
See you again. Thank you.
Sir, where can we get the pre-recorded video, sir?
Uh,